Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Dean Halbridge gripped the steering wheel as he turned onto Maple Street. The familiar houses looked smaller than he remembered, their vinyl siding faded from years of Wisconsin winters. In the passenger seat, Alina shifted 6-month-old Ezra to her other arm. The baby's dark eyes were wide, taking in the unfamiliar neighborhood. "You sure about this?" Dean asked. His voice carried 4 years of unresolved tension. Alina reached over and touched his knee. "Ezra deserves to meet his grandparents, even if it's just once." Dean pulled in the driveway of 428 Maple Street. The house stood exactly as he'd left it: beige ranch with brown shutters and a chain-link fence that needed painting. His mother's ceramic garden gnomes still lined the walkway like tiny sentries. "Remember what we agreed?" Dean said. 2 days maximum. If they start their games, we leave." "They won't." Your mom sounded genuinely excited on the phone. Dean killed the engine. Through the front window, he could see movement. The curtains twitched. "She's been watching for us." Before they could reach the front door, it swung open. Lenore Halbridge emerged wearing a bright yellow sweater and her best company smile. Her graying hair was freshly styled, and she'd applied lipstick with the precision of someone preparing for battle. "Dean, oh my goodness, look at you." She rushed forward with arms outstretched. "And this must be little Ezra." Dean allowed the brief hug, but kept his body rigid. "Mom, you look good." "Oh, stop it. Come in, come in." Ron's in the living room. Lenore's attention immediately shifted to the baby. "Oh my stars, he's beautiful. Look at those eyes. He has your father's chin, Dean." They step inside. The house smelled the same coffee, furniture polish, and the faint mustiness of old carpet. Nothing had changed. The same floral wallpaper, the same family photos covering every surface, the same artificial plants that never needed water. Ron Halbridge sat in his recliner, remote control in hand. He was thicker around the middle than Dean remembered, his hair completely gray now. He looked up when they entered, but didn't rise from his chair. "Dean." A single nod. "Alina." "Dad." Dean's response was equally cooled. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them. Ezra chose that moment to let out a small cry, breaking the tension. "He's probably hungry," Alina said. "It's been a long drive." "Of course. Come, let's get you settled." Lenore bustled toward the kitchen. "I've got everything ready. Coffee's fresh, and I made that coffee cake you used to like, Dean." "I haven't eaten coffee cake in 10 years, Mom." "Well, maybe it's time to start again." A young woman appeared in the kitchen doorway. Dean recognized his cousin Marla, though she looked tired and thinner than he remembered. "Marla's been staying with us since her divorce," Lenore explained. "She's such a help around the house." Marla stepped forward and offered a small smile. "Hi, Dean. It's good to see you." "You too." Dean studied her face. There was something guarded in her expression, a wariness he hadn't seen before. They gathered around the kitchen table. Lenore poured coffee and fussed over Ezra while Alina fed him. Ron remained in the living room, the sound of football commentary drifting through the doorway. "So tell me everything," Lenore said, settling into her chair. "How's work?" "The house. I want to hear all about Chicago." Dean sipped his coffee. "It was too weak, just like always." "Work's fine. Project management keeps me busy." "And Alina, dear," Dean said, "you're a counselor?" "I work with trauma survivors," Alina replied. "Mostly children and families." "How wonderful. Though it must be difficult, dealing with all that sadness. Someone has to help them heal." Lenore's smile faltered slightly. "Yes, well, I suppose." "Dean, you look thin. Are you eating enough?" "I'm fine, Mom. You always were too independent for your own good. Even as a boy, you never let anyone help you with anything." Dean felt the familiar itch of irritation. "Independence isn't a character flaw." "Of course not, sweetheart. I just worry." The conversation continued in fits and starts. Lenore peppered them with questions about their life in Chicago, their apartment, their plans. Dean answered in short, careful responses while Alina tried to fill the awkward gaps. "You know," Lenore said, wiping a spot of spit up from Ezra's chin, "babies need routine. Stability. Maybe it's time you two thought about settling down somewhere permanent." Somewhere with family nearby. We are settled, Dean said. Chicago is home now. But think about little Ezra. He should know his grandparents. We could help with babysitting, and the schools here are excellent, Mom. I'm just saying, there are opportunities here. Your father knows people at the shipping company. Good jobs with benefits. Dean set down his coffee cup with more force than necessary. I have a job. Of course you do. I didn't mean. I know exactly what you meant. Alina placed a hand on Dean's arm. Lenore, we appreciate the concern, but we're happy where we are. Ron's voice carried from the living room. Lenore, leave the boy alone. He made his choice 4 years ago. Dean's jaw tightened. What's that supposed to mean? Ron appeared in the kitchen doorway. Nothing. Just that you've done fine without us. No need to pretend otherwise. I'm not pretending anything. Good. Then we understand each other. The two men stared at each other across the small kitchen. Dean could feel the weight of old arguments, unresolved grievances that had driven him away in the first place. Ezra began to fuss again, his small face turning red as he worked up to a cry. He's probably tired, Alina said quickly. Maybe we should get our things from the car. Yes, let's do that. Dean was already standing. We'll be back in a minute. Outside, Dean breathed deeply of the cool November air. Alina balanced Ezra against her shoulder and looked at him with concern. You okay? For minutes, Dean said. We lasted 4 minutes before the manipulation started. She's trying, Dean. In her own way. She's trying to control us. Same as always. He pulled their overnight bags from the trunk. Did you hear what she said about the schools? The job opportunity? She's already planning our lives. Maybe she just misses you. Dean shouldered the bags and looked back at the house. Through the window, he could see Lenore watching them, her face pressed close to the glass. She misses having someone to manage. There's a difference. They returned to the house to find Lenore setting the table for dinner. The smell of turkey filled the kitchen. I hope you're hungry, she said brightly. I've been cooking all day. It smells wonderful, Alina said. They sat down to eat. Ron carved the turkey with mechanical precision, while Lenore served sides and kept up a stream of chatter about neighbors and local news. Dean ate in silence, watching his parents' familiar dance of passive aggression. Mrs. Peterson next door asked about you, Lenore told Dean. Her grandson's about your age. He's an accountant now. Married, 2 children. They bought a house just 3 blocks from here. Good for him. Very stable career, accounting. Always need accountants. Dean looked up from his plate. Are you suggesting I should have been an accountant? I'm not suggesting anything. Just making conversation. Right. We'll go, Alina offered. You've done enough cooking already. Oh, would you? That would be wonderful. The store is just 15 minutes away. I'll make a list of everything we need. Dean felt a flicker of unease. Maybe we should all go together. Don't be silly, Lenore said, already writing on a piece of paper. Someone should stay with the baby. He's finally sleeping peacefully. Mom's right, Alina said. It'll be quick. 15 minutes, tops. Dean looked at his sleeping son, then at his mother. Something in her eagerness bothered him, but he couldn't put his finger on what. Are you sure you don't mind watching him? Alina asked Lenore. Mind? I'd love to spend some time with my grandson. Lenore's eyes shone with what looked like genuine affection. We'll be fine, won't we, little one? Dean still felt reluctant. He might wake up while we're gone. He's been fussy. Dean, I raised 2 children of my own. I think I can handle 1 sleeping baby for 15 minutes. Ron looked up from his newspaper. Let your mother help, Dean. She knows what she's doing. Of course I do, Lenore said, slightly offended. I may be older, but I'm not helpless. Alina touched Dean's arm. It'll be fine. We'll be back before he even knows we're gone. Dean looked around the table. Everyone was watching him, waiting for his decision. He felt cornered by their expectation that he should trust his mother with his son. All right, he said finally. But we'll be quick. Take your time, Lenore said, waving the list. I've got everything under control here. Dean kissed Ezra's forehead before they left. The baby slept on, oblivious to his parents' departure. As they walked to the car, Dean glanced back at the house. Through the kitchen window, he could see Lenore sitting next to the carrier, her hand gently stroking Ezra's back. She really does love him, Alina said, following his gaze. Yeah, Dean replied, but the unease remained as they drove away. The grocery store was busy with last-minute Thanksgiving shoppers. They moved quickly through the aisles, gathering pie filling, whipped cream, and the other items on Lenore's list. At the checkout, they got stuck behind an elderly woman counting exact change. 15 minutes, Dean muttered, checking his phone. We're already pushing 20. It's fine, Alina said. He's probably still sleeping. But Dean's anxiety was growing. He couldn't shake the feeling that leaving Ezra had been a mistake. As they loaded the groceries into the car, his phone began to ring. The caller ID showed Mom. Dean's blood turned cold as he answered. Hello. Lenore's voice came through in a panic, high and shrill. Dean, you have to come back. Something's wrong with Ezra. He's not breathing. The phone slipped from Dean's hands. Alina caught it before it hit the ground. Lenore? What happened? Lenore. But the line had gone dead. Dean was already starting the car, his hands shaking as he backed out of the parking space. Call 911, he told Alina. Now. As they raced through the suburban streets, Dean's mind filled with worst-case scenarios. He'd left his son, his 6-month-old baby, with people he didn't trust. The very people he'd spent 4 years avoiding. I shouldn't have left him, he said, taking a corner too fast. It's going to be okay, Alina said, but her voice shook as she spoke to the 911 dispatcher. We're almost there. Dean pressed harder on the accelerator. 15 minutes. That's all it had taken for his world to fall apart. The ambulance was already in the driveway when they arrived, its red lights painting the house in frantic color. Dean slammed the car in a park and ran toward the front door. Alina close behind. EMT workers were coming out with a small stretcher. Dean caught a glimpse of Ezra's pale face, an oxygen mask covering most of it. His son's eyes were closed, his tiny body motionless. That's the father, someone said. A paramedic stopped Dean before he could reach the stretcher. Sir, I need you to stay calm. We're taking your son to Madison General. You can follow us there. Is he? Dean couldn't finish the question. He's breathing, but we need to get him to the hospital immediately. Dean tried to see around the paramedic, but they were already loading Ezra into the ambulance. Through the chaos, he spotted his mother standing on the front porch, still in her bathrobe. Her face was white, her hands pressed to her mouth. What happened? Dean demanded, striding toward her. I don't know, Lenore said, her voice barely a whisper. He just stopped breathing. I checked on him, and he wasn't moving. How long was he not breathing? I don't know. I found him like that. I called 911 right away. The ambulance was pulling out of the driveway. Dean ran back to his car, Alina already in the passenger seat. Follow the ambulance, she said. I'll call ahead to the hospital. Dean's hands gripped the steering wheel as he followed the flashing lights through Madison streets. His mind raced with questions. How long had Ezra been unconscious? Would it cause him to stop breathing? Was there permanent damage? At the hospital, they were directed to the pediatric emergency department. A nurse led them to a small waiting room while doctors worked on Ezra. Through the glass doors, Dean could see medical staff moving quickly around a small bed. Mr. and Mrs. Halbridge. A doctor appeared, still wearing surgical gloves. I'm Dr. Martinez. Your son is stable, but I need to ask you some questions. Is he okay? Alina asked. He's breathing on his own now, which is good. But we found some concerning injuries. There's swelling in his brain and evidence of head trauma. Dean felt the room spin. Head trauma. The pattern of injuries is consistent with what we call shaken baby syndrome. Someone grabbed your son forcefully and shook him. The words hit Dean like a physical blow. Someone hurt him? I'm sorry. I know this is difficult to hear. Can you tell me what happened before you found him unconscious? Dean's vision tunneled. Someone had hurt his son. Someone had shaken his 6-month-old baby hard enough to cause brain damage. We went to the store, Alina said, her voice hollow. We left him with his grandmother for about 20 minutes. And she was alone with the baby during that time? Yes. She said she found him not breathing. Dr. Martinez made notes on his chart. I need to inform you that I'm required by law to contact Child Protective Services. The nature of these injuries requires investigation. You think we hurt him? Dean's voice was rising. I'm not making any accusations. But these injuries don't occur accidentally. Someone caused them. and we need to determine who and why. A nurse approached Dr. Martinez and whispered something in his ear. He nodded and turned back to them. A detective is here to speak with you. This is standard procedure. Dean barely heard him. His mind was replaying the morning, leaving Ezra sleeping peacefully, his mother's eager offer to babysit, the 20 minutes they'd been gone. 20 minutes was all it had taken for someone to nearly kill his son. The detective was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes but a serious demeanor. She introduced herself as Detective Chun and led them to a private conference room. "I know this is traumatic," she began, "but I need to understand exactly what happened today." Dean and Alina explained the morning's events, the grocery run, the phone call, finding the ambulance at the house. The detective took careful notes. "Who else was in the house when you left?" she asked. "My father and cousin," Dean replied. "But my mother was the only one watching Ezra." "Has your son shown any signs of distress or injury before today?" "No, nothing. He's been healthy." "What about your family relationships? Any conflicts or tensions?" Dean hesitated. How could he explain 4 years of estrangement, the underlying toxicity that had driven him away? "My relationship with my parents is complicated." "In what way?" "We don't get along well." This was the first time we'd seen them in 4 years. Detective Chen's pen paused. "Why the long estrangement?" "They're controlling, manipulative. We had a falling out when I moved to Chicago, but you trusted them with your baby today." The question hung in the air like an accusation. Dean felt the weight of his own poor judgment. "My wife thought it was important for Ezra to meet his grandparents. I was reluctant, but I agreed to try." "Mr. Halbridge, I have to ask directly, do you believe your mother could have hurt your son?" Dean stared at the detective. The question he'd been avoiding crystallized in his mind. Could his mother have done this? Could she have shaken Ezra in a moment of frustration or anger? "I don't know," he said finally. "A week ago, I would have said no. But now, we'll be interviewing everyone who was in the house," Detective Chin said. "In the meantime, I need you to think carefully about any details that might be important. Your son's life may depend on finding out exactly what happened." After the detective left, Dean and Alina sat in the waiting room. The hospital bustled around them, but they might as well have been on another planet. "Can I see him now?" Alina asked a passing nurse. "The doctor should be out soon with an update." Dean's phone buzzed. A text from his mother. "How is he? We're so worried." He stared at the message, trying to read between the lines. Was it genuine concern or a performance? Had she sent it to establish her innocence? "Dean," Alina was looking at him. "What is it?" He showed her the text. "She's asking about Ezra. What are you going to say?" Dean deleted the message without responding. If his mother had hurt his son, she would get nothing from him. No information, no comfort, no forgiveness. Doctor Martinez returned with a more detailed update. Ezra was conscious and responsive, though groggy from the trauma. The brain swelling was concerning, but not immediately life-threatening. They would need to monitor him closely for the next few days. "Can we see him?" Alina asked. "Yes, but keep the visit short. He needs rest." They followed the doctor to the pediatric ICU. Ezra lay in a crib surrounded by monitoring equipment. His head was bandaged, and an line ran into his tiny arm. But his eyes were open, tracking movement around the room. "Hey, buddy," Dean whispered, reaching through the crib rails to touch his son's hand. "Daddy's here." Ezra's fingers closed around Dean's thumb with surprising strength. The simple gesture broke something loose in Dean's chest, and he felt tears sting his eyes. "He's going to be okay," Alina said, but Dean could hear the uncertainty in her voice. Dean leaned closer to his son. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have protected you. I won't make that mistake again." As they stood watching their injured baby, Dean felt something cold and hard settling in his chest. Someone had done this to Ezra. Someone had taken his perfect, innocent son and hurt him deliberately. He was going to find out who, and when he did, they would pay for what they'd taken from his family. Dean stood in the hospital parking lot, watching Alina buckle Ezra into his car seat. 3 days had passed since the incident, and they were finally taking their son home to Chicago. The doctors had cleared Ezra for travel, though he would need follow-up care and physical therapy for the brain injury. The detective said she'd call with updates, Alina said as they pulled out of the hospital parking garage. Dean said nothing. Detective Chun had interviewed everyone in the house that morning, his parents, Marla, even the neighbors. So far, no one was talking. His mother's story had remained consistent. She'd found Ezra unconscious and called for help immediately. But Dean had caught the subtle changes in her account. First, she'd said Ezra had simply stopped breathing. Then she mentioned he might have choked on something. Later, she suggested a toy could have fallen into the crib. Each version was slightly different, as if she were testing which story sounded most believable. "What are you thinking about?" Alina asked as they merged onto the interstate. "I'm going back." "To Madison?" "Dean, no. We need to focus on Ezra's recovery. Someone hurt our son. The police aren't going to do anything unless they get a confession or find solid evidence." Detective Chun seemed thorough. She's following procedure, filing reports, conducting interviews. But she doesn't know these people like I do. Alina was quiet for several miles. In the back seat, Ezra slept peacefully, his head still wrapped in white bandages. "What exactly are you planning to do?" Dean had been thinking about that question since they'd left the hospital. His parents were liars and manipulators, but they weren't stupid. They would never confess to police. If he wanted the truth, he'd have to get it another way. "I'm going to find out what really happened in that house." "How?" "By doing what I should have done 4 years ago. Stop giving them the benefit of the doubt." Back in Chicago, Dean took a week off work to care for Ezra and make arrangements. He told Alina he needed time to process what had happened, which was partly true. But he was also planning that he researched private investigators, surveillance equipment, and Wisconsin's laws regarding recording conversations. He studied his parents' routines, their neighbors, their friends. He reached out to old contacts in Madison, people who might have information about his family. "You're scaring me," Alina said one evening as Dean hunched over his laptop. "This obsession isn't healthy." "It's not obsession. It's justice. The police are investigating. The police don't care. They see another family dispute, another he said, she said case that'll never go to trial. Maybe it won't. Maybe we'll never know exactly what happened." Dean looked up from his computer. "Are you okay with that? Someone hurt Ezra, and you're okay with just accepting it." "I'm okay with protecting our family," which means focusing on Ezra's future, not dwelling on the past. This isn't the past. Whoever did this is still out there, still pretending to be innocent. Alina sat down beside him. "Even if you prove someone hurt him, what then? What does that accomplish?" "It accomplishes the truth. And then what? We file a civil suit? Press for criminal charges? How does any of that help Ezra?" Dean closed the laptop. "It helps because justice matters. Because the people who hurt children shouldn't get away with it. And if it consumes you, if it destroys our marriage and tears apart our family, what kind of justice is that?" Dean considered her words. She wasn't wrong about the risks. But every time he looked at Ezra's bandaged head, every time he thought about those 20 minutes in the grocery store, the fury burned brighter. "I can't let this go, Alina. I can't pretend it didn't happen. I'm not asking you to pretend. I'm asking you to be smart about this. What would you consider smart? Let the professionals handle it. Focus on being a good father to Ezra. Don't let anger turn you into someone you're not." Dean understood her concern, but she didn't fully grasp what they were dealing with. His parents were experts at manipulation, at presenting themselves as victims while destroying everyone around them. The only way to expose them was to catch them when they thought no one was watching. "I'm going back to Madison for a few days," he told her, "just to pack up our things and tie up loose ends." "Dean, I'll be careful. I won't do anything stupid. Promise me you won't confront them directly. Promise me you won't do anything that could make this worse." Dean looked at his wife, at the fear and exhaustion in her eyes. She'd been through enough trauma. He wouldn't add to it unnecessarily. "I promise," he said, but privately, Dean was done making promises he might not be able to keep. Someone had hurt his son, and that person was going to face consequences. Whether through the legal system or through other means, justice would be served. That he booked a flight to Madison the next morning. Dean rented a small Airbnb 3 blocks from his parents' house. He told the owner he was in town for business, which was technically true. His business was finding out who had hurt his son. That he drove past the house on Maple Street several times before approaching. The front yard looked the same, though someone had taken down the Thanksgiving decorations. Ron's truck sat in the driveway next to his mother's sedan. Dean parked across the street and watched. Through the front window, he could see the blue glow of the television. Normal domestic life, as if nothing had happened. His phone buzzed with a text from Lenore. "How is Ezra? We've been so worried. Please let us know how he's doing." Dean deleted the message without responding. He'd received similar texts every day since leaving Madison. His mother's concern felt performative, like she was building a record of her innocence. That afternoon, Dean drove to an electronics store and purchased several small recording devices. Voice-activated, long battery life, small enough to hide easily. Back at the Airbnb, he studied the layout of his parents' house, identifying the best locations for surveillance. His plan was simple. Get inside the house when no one was home, plant the devices, and wait for his family to reveal their true thoughts about what had happened to Ezra. The opportunity came 2 days later. Dean had been watching the house when Ron left in his truck, heading toward town. 20 minutes later, Lenore emerged wearing her church clothes and drove away in her sedan. That left only Marla, but Dean had observed her routine too. She usually left for work at the grocery store around noon. Sure enough, at 11:45 a.m., Marla appeared and drove away in an old Honda Civic. Dean waited another 30 minutes to be safe, then approached the house. He'd kept the key from his teenage years, hidden in the same magnetic box under the back porch. His mother was a creature of habit. She'd never thought to change the hiding place. Inside, the house felt smaller and more oppressive than he remembered. The air was thick with the scent of his mother's perfume and his father's cigarettes. Dean moved quickly through the rooms, placing recording devices in strategic locations. Under the kitchen table, behind the living room TV, in his parents' bedroom, as he worked, Dean noticed things he'd missed during their Thanksgiving visit. Prescription bottles on the kitchen counter, blood pressure medication for Ron, anti-anxiety pills for Lenore. A stack of past-due bills on the desk. A bottle of whiskey in the cupboard, nearly emptied. In Marla's room, Dean found something interesting. A journal, left open on the dresser. The handwriting was small and cramped, filled with frustration about her living situation and her cousin's visit. Dean photographed several pages with his phone before replacing the journal exactly as he'd found it. One entry, dated the day after Thanksgiving, caught his attention. "Hell, lost it with the baby. I should have intervened, but I was scared. Same old patterns, same old secrets." His heart pounded as he read the words again. Marla had seen something. She knew what had happened to Ezra. Dean finished installing the surveillance equipment and left the house, locking the door behind him. Back at the Airbnb, he uploaded the journal photos to his laptop and studied them carefully. Marla's entries painted a picture of a household under stress. Ron was drinking more than usual. Lenore was anxious about money and obsessed with controlling everyone around her. The holiday visit had been planned as a reconciliation, but it had become another source of conflict. The Dean's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. "Dean? It's Cheryl. Your Aunt Cheryl." Dean remembered her as father's sister, who'd always been the family outsider. She'd moved to Florida years ago and rarely visited. "Aunt Cheryl, how did you get my number?" "I got it from your mother. I heard about what happened to the baby. I wanted to talk to you." "What about?" "Not over the phone. Can you meet me somewhere?" Dean agreed to meet her at a coffee shop downtown. Cheryl arrived 10 minutes late, looking older but still sharp-eyed. She'd never fit in with the rest of the family, too direct and honest for their passive-aggressive games. "I heard about Ezra," she said without preamble. "The head injury. News travels fast. Your mother called me. Wanted sympathy and support." She didn't get it. Dean leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "I mean, this isn't the first time something like this has happened around Lenore." The coffee shop suddenly felt too warm. "What are you talking about?" Cheryl glanced around, then lowered her voice. 20 years ago, before you were born, your mother babysat for the Peterson family. Their little boy, Tommy. He was about 18 months old. Dean remembered Mrs. Peterson, the neighbor who'd asked about him during Thanksgiving dinner. What happened to him? He ended up in the emergency room with a head injury. Exact same situation. Lenore was watching him alone, found him unconscious, called for help. Jesus. The family never pressed charges. They moved away shortly after. But there were whispers, People talk. Dean felt sick. Why didn't anyone tell me about this? Your mother made everyone promise never to mention it. Said it would ruin her reputation, destroy the family. She convinced everyone it was just a tragic accident. But you didn't believe it. I believe Tommy Peterson was a healthy toddler who ended up with brain damage after spending an afternoon alone with your mother. Draw your own conclusions. Dean stared at his coffee, his mind racing. A pattern. This wasn't a moment of frustration or a tragic accident. This was a pattern of behavior. Is Tommy Peterson still alive? He is, but he's disabled. Never developed normally after the injury. His parents spent their life savings on medical care and therapy. And my mother knew this. Of course she knew. But she's very good at convincing herself that bad things just happen around her. That she's the victim of unfortunate circumstances. Dean thought about Ezra, lying in a hospital with bandages around his head. How many other children had suffered because his mother couldn't control her temper? There's something else you should know, Cheryl continued. Marla called me yesterday. She wanted to talk to someone outside the family. What did she say? She saw what happened to Ezra. She was there. Dean's pulse quickened. She told you what she saw. She said Lenore grabbed the baby when he started crying, shook him hard enough that his head snapped back and forth. Then she put him back in the crib and left the room. And Marla didn't try to stop her. She said it happened so fast, she was frozen. By the time she processed what was happening, it was over. Dean gripped his coffee cup so hard his knuckles turned white. She saw my mother hurt my son and said nothing. She's scared, Dean. She's living in that house, dependent on your parents for everything. She knows what Lenore is capable of. What is she capable of? Cheryl hesitated. Your mother has always had a temper. When you and your brother were small, she'd lose control sometimes. Nothing as serious as what happened to Ezra, but there were incidents. Dean tried to remember being afraid of his mother, but the memories were hazy. He'd been young, and children learn to normalize their environment, no matter how dysfunctional. Why are you telling me this now? Because that baby deserves justice. And because I'm tired of keeping secrets for people who don't deserve protection. Dean thanked Cheryl and left the coffee shop with his mind spinning. He had testimony from Marla about what she'd witnessed, evidence of a previous incident with another child, and surveillance devices recording his family's private conversations that it was time to gather the final pieces of evidence. That evening, Dean positioned himself across the street from his parents' house and activated the recording app on his phone. The surveillance devices would transmit audio directly to his laptop, allowing him to listen in real dash time. First, he heard mundane dinner conversation. His parents discussing bills, Ron complaining about a neighbor's loud music, Lenore worrying about the grocery store cutting Marla's hours. Then the conversation shifted. That detective called again today, Lenore said, asking more questions about Thanksgiving morning. What did you tell her? Ron's voice was tense. The same thing I told her before. I found a baby not breathing and called for help. And she believed you. I think so. There's no evidence of anything else. Dean held his breath, waiting for more. Marla's been acting strange, Lenore continued. Jumpy. Avoids talking about what happened. She saw you, didn't she? Ron's voice was quiet but clear through the recording device. A long pause. Then Lenore. She saw me lose my temper. The baby wouldn't stop crying, and I just reacted. Jesus, Lenore. It wasn't that hard. I barely touched him. Hard enough to put him in the hospital. That was an accident. I never meant for him to get seriously hurt. Dean's hands shook as he listened to his mother's confession. She'd admitted it. She'd admitted hurting Ezra. What if Marla talks to the police? Ron asked. She won't. She knows what would happen to her if she did. You mean if we kicked her out? I mean if certain information about her divorce became public. The real reason her husband left her. Dean made a note to investigate what leverage his mother had over Marla. But for now, he had what he needed. A clear confession, recorded on digital audio. His mother had hurt his son, and now he had proof. Dean spent the next morning transcribing the recorded conversation and organizing his evidence. He had Cheryl's testimony about the Peterson boy, Marla's account of what she witnessed, and most importantly, his mother's own admission of guilt captured on audio. But he knew better than to take this evidence directly to the police. Detective Chun would want to know how he'd obtained the recording, and illegal surveillance might make it inadmissible in court. Dean needed a different approach. He called a lawyer in Chicago, someone who specialized in personal injury cases involving children. The consultation fee was expensive, but Dean needed professional advice about his options. Civil court has a lower burden of proof than criminal court, the lawyer explained during their phone call. We don't need to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, just a preponderance of evidence. And damages to an infant can result in significant financial compensation. I'm not interested in money, Dean said. Mr. Halbridge, medical care for traumatic brain injury can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars over a lifetime. Your son may need therapy, special education, ongoing medical monitoring. This isn't about revenge, it's about securing his future. Dean considered this perspective. He wanted justice, but he also wanted to ensure Ezra had every advantage possible as he recovered from his injuries. What kind of evidence would you need? Medical records, witness testimony, any documentation of prior incidents or concerning behavior. If you have recordings of admissions, that would be extremely helpful, though we need to be careful about how they were obtained. Dean scheduled an in-person meeting for the following week. In the meantime, he had other preparations to make. He drove to the Peterson house and knocked on the door. Mrs. Peterson answered, looking older and more frail than he remembered. Dean Halbridge? My goodness, I haven't seen you in years. Mrs. Peterson, I need to ask you about something that happened a long time ago. About your son Tommy and my mother. Her face changed immediately, the warm smile replaced by wariness. I don't know what you're talking about. Please. My baby was hurt recently while my mother was watching him. I think there might be a connection. Mrs. Peterson glanced behind her, then stepped onto the porch and closed the door. What happened to your baby? Head trauma. Brain injury. He was alone with my mother for 20 minutes. Tears filled Mrs. Peterson's eyes. Oh, that poor child. Will you tell me about Tommy? She was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. He was such a bright little boy. Walking early, saying words, so curious about everything. After that day, he lost so much. What did my mother tell you happened? She said she found him at the bottom of the basement stairs. Said he must have wandered down there and fallen. But the injuries didn't match. The doctor said it looked more like he'd been shaken. Did you report to police? We tried, but there was no proof, just suspicion. And your mother was so convincing, so distraught. She made it seem like we were accusing her of something terrible. What's Tommy's condition now? Developmental delays, seizure disorder, limited mobility. He's 38 years old, but functions at about a 10-year-old level. Mrs. Peterson wiped her eyes. We love him dearly, but his life has been so much harder than it should have been. Dean felt the familiar rage building in his chest. 2 children. His mother had hurt 2 children and faced no consequences. Mrs. Peterson, would you be willing to testify about what happened to Tommy? In a civil court, after all these years, it might help my son get the care he needs, and it might prevent this from happening to other children. She studied his face for a long moment. I'll think about it. Can you give me a few days? Dean left his contact information and drove away feeling like the pieces were finally coming together. He had evidence, witnesses, and legal representation. Now he needed to execute his plan carefully. That afternoon, he called Detective Chun. I want to know the status of the investigation into my son's injury. We're still gathering evidence, Mr. Halbridge. These cases can take time. Have you found anything that suggests criminal charges are warranted? I can't discuss specifics of an ongoing investigation. Detective, I think my mother hurt my son. Do you have enough evidence to arrest her? A pause. At this time, we don't have sufficient evidence to file criminal charges. I'm sorry. Dean had expected this answer. The criminal justice system was designed to protect the accused, not to seek truth. But civil court operated under different rules. Thank you for your honesty. Mr. Halbridge, if you have additional evidence or information, please bring it to us immediately. I will. Dean hung up the phone and opened his laptop. It was time to file the paperwork that would destroy his mother's carefully constructed facade of innocence. The personal injury lawsuit against Lenore Halbridge would be filed the next morning. Along with it, Dean would request a restraining order to keep his mother away from Ezra permanently. he'd also decided to take one additional step. The recorded confession might not be admissible in court, but it could be very effective in the court of public opinion. His mother cared more about her reputation than anything else. It was time to take that away from her. Dean began typing a detailed letter to the editor of the Madison newspaper, outlining the pattern of abuse and his mother's admission of guilt. He wouldn't release the actual recording that would be saved for the lawsuit, but he could describe what he'd heard in enough detail to destroy her credibility. That'd be why the time he finished, it was nearly midnight. Dean looked over his work, the lawsuit, the restraining order petition, the letter to the newspaper. His mother had spent decades manipulating people and escaping consequences. That was about to end. Dean filed the lawsuit on a Tuesday morning. The process server found Lenore at her weekly book club meeting at the community center, surrounded by a dozen of her closest friends. According to the server's report, she turned pale and left immediately without explanation. By afternoon, Dean's phone was ringing constantly. First his father, then Marla, then neighbors and family friends who'd heard about the lawsuit. Dean ignored them all. The newspaper ran his letter to the editor on Thursday, under the headline, "Pattern of Child Abuse Demands Justice." The article detailed Tommy Peterson's injury 20 years earlier and the striking similarities to what had happened to Ezra. It described Dean's recorded evidence of his mother's confession, though it didn't include the actual audio. The response was immediate and devastating. Lenore's book club dropped her. The church asked her to step down from the nursery committee. Neighbors who'd known her for decades began avoiding her in the grocery store. Dean watched it all unfold from Chicago, where he'd returned to care for Ezra and prepare for the legal battle ahead. His son was making good progress in physical therapy, though the doctors warned that some effects of the brain injury might not be apparent for years. The hospital called. Alina told him Friday evening. 3 more staff members want to give statements for the lawsuit. They remembered inconsistencies in your mother's story. Dean wasn't surprised. Once people knew it was safe to speak up, the truth had a way of emerging. His phone rang. Ron's number. "We need to talk," his father said without preamble. "About what?" "About ending this before it destroys everyone." Dean considered hanging up, but curiosity got the better of him. "I'm listening." "Your mother made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But she's not a monster. She hurt my son. She hurt another child 20 years ago. How is that not monstrous?" She was overwhelmed. The baby was crying. She lost her temper for just a moment. "Dad," she shook a 6-month-old baby hard enough to cause brain damage. "That's not losing your temper. That's assault." She never meant for him to get seriously hurt. Intent doesn't matter. Results matter. Ezra could have died. Ron was quiet for a long moment. "What do you want from us?" "I want the truth. I want acknowledgement of what she did. And I want assurance that she'll never have the opportunity to hurt another child. She's already agreed never to babysit again." "Isn't that enough?" "No, Dad. It's not even close to enough." "Then what? You want to destroy her completely? Is that going to help Ezra?" Dean thought about this question. Would destroying his mother undo the damage to his son? Would it prevent other children from being hurt? Would it serve any purpose beyond satisfying his need for revenge? "I want justice," he said finally. "Real justice, not just empty promises." "Tell me what that looks like." Dean had given this considerable thought. Public admission of guilt, legal acknowledgement of liability, financial compensation for Ezra's medical care, and a guarantee that she'll never be alone with children again. And if she agrees to all that, then maybe we can avoid a trial. But the restraining order stays in place permanently. Ron sighed. "I'll talk to her." "Dad." "Yeah, I know you knew. About Tommy Peterson, about what Mom was capable of. You could have prevented this." The line went quiet. "Then I know. That's something I'll have to live with." Ron hung up. Dean stared at his phone, surprised by his father's admission. He'd expected denial, deflection, blame shifting. Instead, he'd gotten something close to honesty. The next morning brought a call from his lawyer. "They want to settle. Your mother's attorney reached out about a negotiated resolution." "What are they offering?" "Full admission of liability, monetary damages to be determined by mediator, and agreement to a permanent restraining order. In exchange, they want confidentiality about the settlement terms." "No confidentiality," Dean said immediately. This stays public. That's unusual in these cases. I don't care. The purpose of this lawsuit isn't just compensation. It's accountability. If she wanted privacy, she shouldn't have hurt my son. I'll communicate your position, but you should know that rejecting confidentiality might make them withdraw the settlement offer. Then we go to trial. I'm not protecting her reputation anymore. Dean had realized something important during the past week. His mother's greatest fear wasn't financial ruin or legal consequences. It was public humiliation. The loss of her carefully maintained image as a loving grandmother and pillar of the community. That fear was Dean's greatest weapon. That afternoon, Mrs. Peterson called. I've been thinking about what you asked, about testifying, and I'll do it. Tommy deserves to have his story told, and your baby deserves justice. Thank you. This can't be easy for you. It's not. But keeping quiet for 20 years didn't protect anyone. Maybe speaking up will. Dean added Mrs. Peterson's name to the witness list. The case was becoming stronger every day, as more people found the courage to tell the truth. But the most important evidence was still to come. The deposition was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in Madison. Dean's lawyer had arranged to question Lenore under oath, with her attorney present. It would be the first time Dean had seen his mother since Thanksgiving morning. She looked smaller than he remembered, her face pale and drawn. The confident, controlling woman who'd raised him seemed diminished, almost fragile. But Dean reminded himself that appearances could be deceiving. His mother was an expert at playing the victim. Mrs. Halbridge, Dean's lawyer began, can you describe what happened on the morning of November 24th when you were caring for your grandson? Lenore's hands shook slightly as she answered. Ezra was sleeping in his carrier. I was doing dishes in the kitchen. When I checked on him later, he wasn't breathing. How much later? I don't know exactly. Maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And what did you do when you found him unconscious? I called 911 immediately. Did you attempt CPR? I was too scared. I didn't want to make things worse. Dean's lawyer consulted his notes. Mrs. Halbridge, have you ever cared for other children who suffered injuries while under your supervision? Lenore's attorney objected, but the question was allowed. I don't know what you're referring to. 20 years ago, you babysat Tommy Peterson. He ended up in the emergency room with a head injury. Do you remember that incident? That was completely different. Tommy fell down the basement stairs. According to medical records, Tommy's injuries were consistent with shaken baby syndrome, not a fall. The same type of injuries your grandson sustained. I don't know anything about medical records. I only know what I saw. The lawyer continued methodically, building a case that Lenore's version of events didn't match the physical evidence. She became increasingly defensive, her answers shorter and more evasive. Mrs. Halbridge, is it possible that you became frustrated with Ezra's crying and shook him to make him stop? Absolutely not. I would never hurt a baby. But you did lose your temper with him, didn't you? No. You grabbed him forcefully when he was crying. No. Mrs. Halbridge, do you understand that perjury is a felony? Her attorney objected again, but the damage was done. Lenore looked terrified. During a break, Dean watched his mother through the conference room window. She was crying, her careful composure finally cracking. For a moment, he almost felt sorry for her. Then he thought about Ezra lying in the hospital, and the sympathy vanished. When the deposition resumed, the lawyer played his trump card. Mrs. Halbridge, I'm going to play an audio recording and ask if you recognize the voices. The lawyer activated a small speaker. Dean's recorded conversation filled the room. His mother's voice admitting she'd lost her temper, acknowledging that she'd hurt Ezra, expressing concern about Marla's potential testimony. The color drained from Lenore's face. Her attorney looked stunned. Do you recognize your voice in that recording, Mrs. Halbridge? She stared at the speaker as if it were a venomous snake. Where did you get that? Do you recognize your voice? Yes, but... And do you recall making those statements? I was upset. I didn't mean. You stated that you lost your temper with the baby and reacted. Is that correct? It wasn't like that. I barely touched him. But you did touch him? You did grab him? Lenore looked desperately at her attorney, who was scribbling furious notes. I want to take a recess, the attorney said. Answer the question, Mrs. Halbridge. Did you grab your grandson and shake him? She started crying again, harder this time. I didn't mean to hurt him. He just wouldn't stop crying, and I was so tired, and I just wanted him to be quiet for a minute. So you shook him? Yes. The word came out as a whisper. Yes, I shook him, but I never meant for him to get hurt. I swear I never meant for him to get hurt. Dean felt a cold satisfaction wash over him. Finally, the truth. Finally, justice. The deposition ended shortly after Lenore's confession. Her attorney immediately requested a settlement conference. We want this resolved quickly and quietly, he told Dean's lawyer. What are your client's demands? Dean's lawyer consulted the list they prepared. Full admission of liability in court documents. Monetary damages of $2 million. Permanent restraining order. And Mrs. Halbridge must publicly acknowledge what she did. $2 million is excessive. Mr. Halbridge's son may need lifelong medical care. $2 million barely covers potential future costs. The public acknowledgement is problematic. Then we'll see you at trial. With the confession we just recorded, I'm confident about our chances. The settlement negotiations took 3 days. Lenore's attorney tried various compromises, but Dean refused to budge on his core demands. He wanted complete capitulation, not a face-saving deal. Finally, they reached an agreement. Lenore would admit liability in a public court filing. She would pay damages through the forced sale of the family house, with proceeds going into a trust for Ezra's care. She would submit to a permanent restraining order and agree never to seek contact with Dean's family again. Most importantly, she would stand before a judge and publicly acknowledge what she had done. 1 year later, Dean stood in his backyard in Asheville, North Carolina, watching Ezra take unsteady steps across the grass. His son had defied the doctor's worst predictions, regaining most of his motor skills through intensive therapy. There would always be concerns about cognitive development, but for now, Ezra was a happy, curious toddler. He's doing so well, Alina said, joining Dean on the deck. The therapist says his progress is remarkable. Dean nodded, never taking his eyes off his son. He's stronger than they thought, than we all thought. The legal case had concluded 6 months earlier. Lenore had stood before a packed courtroom and read a statement acknowledging that she had injured Ezra through her own actions. The local newspaper had covered the hearing, and the story had spread through social media. His mother's reputation was destroyed beyond repair. The house on Maple Street had sold quickly, with the proceeds funding a trust that would pay for Ezra's care throughout his life. Ron had moved to a small apartment across town. According to neighbors, he rarely left except to buy groceries and alcohol. Dean felt no sympathy for either of them. Marla sent another card, Alina said, handing him an envelope postmarked from California. Dean opened it to find a simple thank you note with 2 words, thank you. He looked at the card for a moment, then carried it to the outdoor fire pit and dropped it in. The paper caught fire immediately, curling and blackening until nothing remained but ash. Dean, Alina's voice carried a note of concern. She had a chance to protect my son. She chose not to. She was scared. So was Ezra. He was 6 months old and completely helpless, and the people who were supposed to protect him failed him. Alina was quiet for a moment. Do you think you'll ever forgive any of them? Dean considered the question as he watched Ezra explore the garden. Forgiveness was supposed to be healing, liberating. But Dean felt no desire for liberation from his anger. It had served him well, driving him to seek justice when others would have accepted defeat. No, he said finally. I won't. Doesn't that hurt you more than it hurts them? Maybe, but it also ensures I never forget what they're capable of. What people are capable of when they think no one's watching. Ezra toddled over to them, his face bright with discovery. He held up a leaf he'd found, babbling excitedly about his treasure. Dean knelt down and took the leaf, examining it with the same seriousness his son showed. That's a good find, buddy. Very good. Ezra giggled and wandered back to his exploration. Dean watched him go, marveling at his resilience, his capacity for joy despite everything that had happened to him. I made him a promise, Dean said to Alina. In the hospital, when he was lying there with bandages around his head, I promised him that no one would hurt him and walk away. And you kept that promise. Yes, and I'll keep protecting him for the rest of his life. As the sun set over the North Carolina mountains, Dean felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Not peace, he wasn't sure he'd ever feel peaceful again, but satisfaction in knowing that justice had been served, that his son was safe, and that the people who had harmed his family had faced real consequences. That he didn't need closure. He didn't need forgiveness. That he had something better, the absolute certainty that he would never allow anyone to hurt his child again. As Israel played in the fading light, Dean whispered the same words he'd spoken in a hospital room a year earlier. "I promised you. No one touches you," and walks away. It was a promise he intended to keep for the rest of his life.